Good morning. Hello. I am super excited to do this class. Risotto is a recipe that we make often at our house, and we really love it because it really can change with the seasons. I feel like what we're doing today, mushrooms and the preserved lemons, really can go year round, but I love adding things like zucchini or yellow squash to it in the summertime, or we'll sometimes do like roasted broccoli with our risotto in the winter time, just depending on whatever, time of year it is. So this, just keep in mind that this is just a very base risotto recipe. And then the mushrooms and preserved lemons are just the like um, extras that we're adding, and that you can always sub out different vegetables. Roasting them ahead of time is a great way to make sure that you don't end up adding a lot of more liquid to your dish. So the mushrooms are going to, obviously, the moisture in them is going to evaporate in the oven. It's going to really intensify the umami flavor that mushrooms have. But other vegetables, before you add them to risotto, it's really nice to cook them in advance as well. And the technique of roasting is going to help evaporate that extra liquid from all of them. So I'm actually going to start with our the roasted mushrooms. I'm going to go ahead and get those in the oven. So I have this tray set up that has, in the restaurant we call them like resting racks. I think some people know them as like cookie cooling racks or cake cooling racks. So anything that you have, it doesn't even have to fit your pan this well. If you have like a circular one, you could probably work with that too if you have less mushrooms. But by having the mushrooms not be right on the baking tray, it's going to allow air to circulate around them. And so you're going to get a nice caramelization, roasted flavor all around your mushrooms. So at the grocery store, I was able to get some shiitake mushrooms, which are these little guys. For the shiitakes, I am going to take this stem off. You're just going to remove it. The shiitake stem is really woody, and so it's not going to cook down as we're cooking. And you'll find if you just don't want to eat it is the bottom line. But I'm going to save it for my vegetable stock. But for the cremini mushrooms that I have here, I'm actually just going to leave these stems on. If a stem pops off, I'll throw it in to go with my stock. But otherwise, I just leave those stems on because they are going to cook in the same method way that the tops are going to cook. And so texturally, once you get them cut up and mixed into this risotto, you're not going to really be able to tell the difference between the stem and the mushroom. So I'm going to show you guys here how I'm going to quarter them. The shiitakes were pretty small, so I'm really just going to cut these guys in half. But the creminis, I'm going to cut into quarters. So I'm going to cut it in half. And then now I'm going to have a flat side that I can cut it again. And the shiitakes, I'm just going to cut in half. So I've got my bowl here. I will be very honest with you guys that I was a little rushed this morning to set up. And so I probably could have cut all of these mushrooms ahead of time, but I didn't. But luckily I cut fast. So mushrooms are something that we use a lot at Gold Ring so that we can not miss meat as much. So I did mention that umami flavor. And in case you guys don't know what umami is, it is the fifth flavor on your tongue. And some other ingredients that fall in that umami category are things like Parmesan cheese, canned tomatoes, soy sauce. So, and also like all sorts of, meat, poultry, seafood, all has that umami flavor. So when you start cooking with a vegetarian recipe, it's really helpful to incorporate mushrooms to help add some of that umami flavor, but also texturally, I feel like mushrooms can stand in the place of some meat. And then today, obviously, we're doing the scallops. So that'll be our protein. The shiitakes here, I'm going to be a little less fancy. I'm just going to kind of stack them on top of each other and cut them in half. I'm going to toss them all in this bowl over here with a little bit of oil, salt, and pepper. So I'm not adding a lot of other flavors to it because I really just want those mushrooms to be the star of the show. And of course, you can use all sorts of mushrooms. So I could have used button mushrooms. You could even use portobello mushrooms. I would recommend dicing those so that they cook a little more evenly. But any really mushroom is going to do the trick there. The hen of the woods is really good, although very expensive. If you really feel like going out and going big, hen of the woods make great roasted mushrooms. So I'm just going to measure my 2 tablespoons of oil here. And I get a half a teaspoon of salt. And then I get as much black pepper as I want. So I'm just going to throw a couple of cracks in there. So for something like this, I'm just like adding the pepper right to the bowl. Like I'm not going to bother measuring that. And then I'm actually going to get my hands in here this time. So I am just mixing it really well to make sure that all of my mushrooms have the oil, because we didn't give you a lot of oil, so you don't want to lose any of it. And then I'm just going to spread it out onto my pan. So the recipe says 375. I just want to be honest, I have my oven at 400, mainly because my oven runs kind of low. So I did up it a little bit. But I also don't want us like waiting forever for these roasted mushrooms. So I'm going to take a chance and speed it up a little bit. And in it goes.
Now, Katie, with those mushrooms, could you have these done you could do these in advance.
Oh, definitely.
Like if you were going to make them and have them on hand, because you could use these in a variety of ways, right? Like we could put them, we could just eat them on the side. Hold on a second here. Okay. I don't know what happened there. That was weird. Okay, you're back.
Okay, great. Hi. All right. So yes, absolutely. You can roast mushrooms and leave them in your refrigerator, and they are delicious on so many things. Like you can throw them in a grilled cheese sandwich. You could throw it in a salad. Yes. So the sky's the limit with the mushrooms being roasted in advance. So yeah, keep that in mind that you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our risotto. So I want to show you guys what I have. I've got this big pot here. So it's like a 6-quart pot, and I have my lid because that's going to be part of my final step, is that I'm going to cover it and let it steam a little bit. I feel like this is one of those things that they don't always say in recipes, and it's good to know that little bit of resting time that you give your risotto can really help you not evaporate too much of the liquid. So you still get a really creamy risotto, but also guarantee that your rice is cooked all the way through. Because we're looking for it to not have any crunch in the middle, but you also don't want it to be like mushy. So this one is definitely a very like technique driven method of cooking the rice. And really you could use a lot of different rices in this manner to help kind of pull the starch out. So there's a lot of other short grain rices that you could use that are very starchy. I am today using arborio rice, which is the most traditional. So I do have some shallots here that I am going to cut, and I'm going to cut them just like I cut onions. So, you know, they've also got this paper on them. So I'm just going to trim the top off, and I'm going to cut it in half as much down the middle as I can so that I can peel this exterior off. And that is going to go into my compost. I'm not going to bother saving this shallot skin. I really love shallots in risotto. You could definitely do a yellow or white onion because really it all just kind of melts into the dish because I'm going to cut them pretty small. My shallots have these little like kind of green growths in the middle, so I'm just going to pull that out. It doesn't mean that my shallot is bad, but I just don't want that green interior for them.
Yeah, I always take that green part out when I get it sometimes in garlic and also just like regular onions sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's true. I feel like sometimes it happens like almost immediately when I come home from the grocery store. So it's like it's not even my fault that the produce is already kind of old. It's like, and then I think too, just there's something about the weather here, things just age a little bit faster. All right, so the shallot has those lines just like the onion does, and I'm gonna stop just like the onion about a finger's width from this end. So I did keep the root end onto this so that when I make numerous cuts, I still have a whole thing. It's not like falling apart on me. So you go make those cuts following the lines, and then you just go in and make your dice. Notice the tip of my knife never leaves my cutting board. All right, this one's a weird one. So I'm just gonna julienne this one because it's kind of like it didn't have the root end. I'm not sure what happened to that one. But like I said, these things, they really just kind of melt in to the rice. So I don't think you have to worry too much about you know, them being these like perfect dice, but you are going for a pretty small dice there. And I don't know, can you guys see like how little the width is there? So pretty skinny for that first cut. So I'm gonna saute the shallots, and then I'm actually gonna add my rice to the pan as well. And you do this because you really just want everything to be the same temperature to start with when you start adding your liquids to it. So doing that little warming up really helps, but it also gives a little toastiness to the rice that I think comes out nice as well. Okay, so there is my diced shallots. I'm going to turn this on like medium heat. So we're not really looking for color. We really just want them to, you know, be melting in that oil butter mixture. So I did do a little mix up for us here that we get both oil and butter. Oh wait, is that true? We did the butter and oil together, yeah. Sometimes you can add the butter at the end, but I really like how the shallots kind of start to absorb some of the butter when you do it at the beginning. Okay, so we're gonna get those melty. I do have my favorite spoon here. I also make my golden oatmeal with it, which is why it has this lovely yellow hue to it. But I really like it because it has this kind of angled side. So when it comes time to do all the stirring that we've got ahead of us, it really gets to the bottom of the pan. I also want to make sure everybody knows that I have done my mise en place ahead of time. So I talk about this a lot. It means everything in its place. It helps obviously to have everything close to you. So I have my wine. I was telling Heather before class that I actually drank the rest of the bottle last night, but I was smart enough to save the 1 cup of wine that I knew I was going to need for the recipe today. How many of you thought I was going to be drinking wine at 11 o'clock in the morning with you guys?
I did.
I mean,
I
I've
thought
been
it was
supposed to do it.
possible. I thought it might happen.
All right, so I'm just gonna let that cook for a little bit. I've got some little bubbles on there. Again, remember, we're not looking for color. I've got my rice already measured out here, my 2 cups of rice. You don't want to do any rinsing or any of that business. And over here on my stove top is my chicken stock. So I've had that on some really low heat back here. Actually, I'm going to move back to that one. And I kept when I was warming it up, I kept a lid on it because I didn't want to risk evaporating any of the chicken stock because you are going to need that. Oh, and you know what? Actually, I almost forgot the mushrooms for it. Okay, so I do add a few dried mushrooms to my chicken stock. It just gives that extra umami flavor to it, to add some of those mushrooms in there. So if you were using vegetable stock or chicken stock, that adding that little bit of umami is really is nice. But since we're doing roasted mushrooms for our in the risotto, it really just kind of ups the ante of getting some of that even more mushroom flavor into it. If you don't have any stock, you could absolutely use make a mushroom broth with the dried mushrooms. That's just water and the dried mushrooms. I would just know time to give it, to make sure that those mushrooms really impart their flavor into that water. So you would just want to get that going a little bit ahead of time, either the day before or, maybe even just while you're cutting everything. You might want a little bit more time than that.
Chef Katie, 2 things real quick. Is there any way that you can get that, get your phone camera a little lower and closer to the action? And then the other thing I wanted to see if okay, that is looking, yeah, it's closer.
That is, I think,
as close as we can get it.
As close as I can get it, yeah.
We're working with what we got here, people. The other thing that has been brought up, Judy is asking about rinsing the rice. And I'm going to let you speak to this because I know, often in other types of rice recipes, we'll see to rinse the rice. So can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yes, I will. I am going to add my rice though while I do that. So
okay.
My shallots are now what I would call like opaque or getting a little translucent. So I'm going to go ahead and add my rice. All right, I'm going to stir. I'm doing this like shake and stir because I want my rice to get all of that oil and butter coating on it. And it's quite even. Does that help too? I can get a little bit closer. So let's see. Tell me the questions again. I'm sorry.
So so you know how in some recipes we'll see that they want you to rinse the rice? What's up with that? And why would we not rinse it for this type of recipe?
Yeah, so they have you rinse it because they want you to get those extra starches off so that your rice doesn't clump together, right? When you scoop it on the plate, it kind of still has, it's like quite individual grains of rice. And so if you rinse the arborio rice, which is a very starchy rice, then you would lose the creaminess that we are trying to achieve with the risotto style of cooking, which is that we're adding liquid slowly and drawing out those starches. And so it's the starches that are what seem so creamy. Now, often restaurants will add heavy cream to a risotto to make it creamier, but truly that is not necessary. All right, so I'm just gonna rotate my mushrooms. I'll let you guys see what they look like right now.
Getting
So
brown.
partway there. But you can tell like they have shrunk in size a little bit, which is what we're going for. They're gonna kind of shrivel up because we're evaporating all of that liquid water. I'm sorry, water that is in the mushrooms. All right, so I believe now confidently that my rice is toasted. So I'm gonna add my wine. Could you guys hear that sizzle?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was gonna say that's a good sign that your pan is a good temperature. Okay, so now this is the first step in getting those starches out. So I definitely do a lot of stirring, more at the beginning and less at the end. I'm also gonna turn my heat down a little bit now to just like a medium. Before it was at a little bit more like a medium high. And maybe, I don't know if you guys can see that like my liquid already looks kind of like creamy color, right? It's the starches are already coming off of the risotto. I also really love the wine flavor in risotto. If it's something you don't care for, or you just don't incorporate alcohol into your diet, you can absolutely skip the wine. Or you could use a half a cup of wine, and it's going to cook, it won't be as, the flavor won't be as strong. But all the alcohol does cook off of the wine in this process. Just to give you guys the heads up, I did use a Pinot Grigio. That was the type of wine that I chose. I think it was like a $12 bottle of wine. So, I'm not going to buy like a $25 bottle of wine to put a cup into my recipe. It's much, I kind of pick that like middle of the road, but I definitely always say you don't ever want to cook with a wine that you wouldn't drink. All right, so most of my liquid has absorbed, and so it's time to put my first ladle of liquid. So this is a 2-ounce ladle that I have. So I'm gonna go ahead and put 3 in there. You want your rice to be floating. Can you guys see like how it moves when I do that? So that is a good sign. And then again, like I said, for the first half we're gonna do a lot of stirring. Because that's where those starches are like in the exterior of the rice, and so we're really trying to get that off. And then it means that we can kind of chill out a little bit towards the end, that we don't have to stir as often. I am, being careful that I'm getting like my corners, which is why I love this angled wooden spoon to do it in. Because I can make sure that I'm getting those corners and, kind of dragging around the sides so that I don't have any rice that is missing this, mushroom chicken stock bath. I'm sure you can assume I made my chicken stock at home. It's true. Did you have a question, Heather?
I just thought I would, while you're doing all this stirring, I would bring up something that people might be wondering possibly, which is that I've, seen recipes for these no stir risottos, or these like risottos that you can make in the oven, or, alternative methods. Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you ever tried any of them? Probably, I'm sure you have not tried them, but because you're a real traditionalist.
I know. I
Um,
don't allow myself very many shortcuts. My life would probably be so much easier if I was like capable sometimes of letting go of some of these things, but um yeah, I haven't. And I think my thing that, and in general, I feel like Goldring's thoughts is that like if you are cooking this food yourself and not buying it prepackaged or from a box, I don't care how you cook it. Like if getting it in the oven means that like you and your family can sit down and enjoy dinner without you feeling super stressed and everybody wants to eat it and you're happy, then like maybe a traditionalist wouldn't call it risotto. You would just call it something else. But that whatever floats your boat. Like if it works for you. So
yeah.
I will say I'd love to hear if anybody else actually has ever done like an oven one. I would assume that the trick with that is that you really just add a lot more liquid so that your rice is cooked, but you still have a good amount of liquid still in that baked thing that goes in the oven so that when you stir it at the end, some of those starches
Yeah.
come out.
I also think, I mean, I feel like there's a time and a place for doing things this traditional way and then taking the shortcuts, because yeah, I mean, maybe I wouldn't do this on a really busy night, or if I've had a stressful day at work, but then in some cases maybe I would, because this is very relaxing and kind of calming, I think, to just stand and do this stirring. So I don't know, I think you could go either way, but I do like, Ty says oven risotto sounds like a weird jambalaya. I swear I've seen recipes for it in the past. I'll have to like do some more research into that.
Yeah.
And I've definitely done some methods where like you can get away with adding a little bit more liquid at a time and like not the constant stirring. But I do think it's nice to see and learn that this technique, which is the traditional way of making risotto. And I love what you brought up too, Katie, about, my favorite thing about risotto, I think, is that people think it's very rich and decadent, and they assume that there's probably a lot of cream and or butter, but you really don't need either of those things, and you can still make a very creamy, delicious risotto. And like you said, you certainly could add it, but it's not necessary. So, you might think, oh, risotto is not necessarily the healthiest thing, but it's not the worst thing either, depending on how you prepare it.
Yes, I agree. And then I also think, incorporating vegetables into it, like
Mhm.
picking a lean meat or, protein to serve with it is also, kind of helps make it a little bit more of a balanced meal in that sense.
Yeah. Do you have any other favorite like flavor combinations or other vegetable things that you would put in risotto? I know I have had a lot of different options. What are your thoughts? What are some of your
I
favorites?
mean, I definitely love like roasted zucchini and squash. Like I love like a summery risotto. That's, zucchini and squash in New Orleans like means summer to me. So you get to the point where there's just so much zucchini and squash in your life that you're like so happy to have it in a dish that has already such like a strong profile of its own. I think earlier I said roasted broccoli, and I'm trying to think. I mean, mushroom is like our
Yeah.
go-to. I mean, that's the one we use the most often.
I've also done a mushroom and butternut squash, which was really
Oh, yeah,
nice.
that sounds good.
And then I also really like asparagus when you have good asparagus in season. And I've even had one with corn.
Oh, yeah.
In the summertime when you have really nice corn and you cut it off the cob, and it
Yeah.
just, is a little different.
Yeah. I also love green peas, especially
Yeah.
frozen ones, because then you actually don't have to do anything to it. You throw it in the pot when you put the lid on at the very end, that little extra steaming part that we're doing. You just throw those peas on top and like, voila, you got a green vegetable in your dish that you didn't have to do anything to. I did want to talk a little bit about like how these this dish is served in restaurants. Is that, you know, you prep like a very large batch of risotto, and once it is like 85 to 90% done, you pull it from the pot. And you spread it out on a baking sheet tray, like the one I roasted the mushrooms on, not the resting rack, but the actual tray. And you try to get as much of a thin layer so that the rice stops cooking. And then you throw it in the walk-in cooler or your refrigerator and let that rice cool down. And then when it's time to, you know, when a customer orders the risotto, you simply put some chicken stock in a skillet or a little pot, and then you add that cold risotto to it. And so on the times that I'm kind of, well, I will say, so my favorite thing is actually leftover risotto. Like I like it when we make it and eat it right away at home, but I actually like it even more the next day. So if you're the type of person who can plan ahead, or as Heather, I think this is what made me think of it, is Heather was saying that maybe she wouldn't do this on a night that she was like really rushed. So this is like a great thing to do on the weekend then when you're hanging out and you're like getting all your laundry done or whatever day that is that maybe you're like a little more in one space at home. And then know that you can reheat this so easily. You also could leave it at just the risotto, and when you reheat it, add your mushrooms or add broccoli or add zucchini. And then you're not even eating the same risotto every day. You're eating like, you know, a variety. I do want to mention here, so like, see how it's still wobbly, but it's not swimming, right? My rice isn't kind of swimming. So one, I'm building up the starch, but this is when I know it's time to add 2 more. And now I'm just doing 2 ladles at a time because you'll see, because of the starch in there, like those 2 ladles make it a little loosey-goosier.
Now I know, Chef Katie, in the recipe, you know, as I was getting it typed up and ready, I noticed that, you know, we call for starting off with a lot of chicken stock.
Yeah.
But can you speak a little bit to that aspect about how, you know, it's not really an exact science, right? Like you kind of have to keep going and and eventually you'll taste it and see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will admit, so like right now, I'm just adding a cup of water to my chicken stock because this is the time where I start to get paranoid that like, I don't have enough chicken stock. And there's nothing worse than just adding like plain old water at the end, although it's doable. I'm not against it. I've done it before, but if you think like, oh no, I don't think I have enough stock. And I've added this mushrooms in here. And so adding another cup of water is going to give you that safety. It's also a good way to realize that now when you reheat your risotto, you've got a little extra chicken stock that has those mushrooms in it. But yeah, you know, risotto is a little more finicky than like pasta, where you're like, okay, boiling water, 10 minutes or 12 minutes, whatever, it's done. The risotto is something that, you know, some weeks it takes 6 cups, some weeks it takes 8 cups. And so I wanted to give you guys, I think I gave you 10 cups in this recipe because I really just there's nothing worse than running out of the liquid and your rice not being cooked. And so I wanted to safeguard you guys for that reason. And then also keep in mind, you can freeze chicken stock. So whatever chicken stock was left over, you can put in like one of these containers. That's exactly a cup, or the pint, which is 2 cups. And you can freeze it and save it for later. All right. Oh yeah, my mushrooms are looking good. Okay. Can you guys see?
Oh yeah, crispy.
Right? Yeah, they've shriveled up. They're like much darker in color. I'm happy I can turn my oven off now.
I think it's so interesting. If you know, mushrooms to me are so interesting because I'm sure everybody's probably had at some point in their life a piece of a raw mushroom. You know, sometimes people put them in salads. I don't know why, but you know, you think about what a raw mushroom tastes like, and then you think about what it tastes like once it's cooked and it's, you know, all this flavor gets concentrated. And I mean, talk about a transformation. It's such a different thing between raw and cooked. Whereas other vegetables, you know, I'm thinking like you were saying about zucchini and summer squashes, you know, technically you can eat those raw or very, very lightly cooked. And there's almost, you know, not a whole lot that changes in the flavor, but a mushroom, oh my gosh, it just gets so delicious when it's cooked.
Yes, I agree with you. Like roasted mushrooms are so good, and I feel like on that vein, even more offensive than a raw mushroom is a canned mushroom. Like unless you are chopping it up and adding it to like cream cheese or a heavy cream sauce, I don't know, but like canned mushrooms are just kind of slimy and floppy and like you know, just unacceptable if you ask me.
Yeah, definitely you don't get the same kind of flavor in a can, you know, there are certain vegetables I think that you could get away with canned that you really don't notice much of a difference, but yeah, mushroom would not be high
Yeah.
on my list canned.
Okay, so the good news is we're at that part of the risotto where I don't feel like I have to be stirring it constantly, right? So for those last like 10 minutes, it was the whole time I was stirring. Now I'm okay with just letting it hang out for a little bit. And so while I do that, I'm gonna show you guys the preserved lemons.
I'm really excited about these preserved lemons because I think they're something that's really kind of, in some ways, a little out there, but also really cool and a great thing that you could have in your fridge for some added of
Yeah.
flavor.
Yeah, and so I tried to give you guys like a reasonable amount. I do want to show you guys how much preserved lemon keep in our house.
That's as big as your head.
I know, right? That's how my husband rolls. I'm gonna give Joe all the credit. He makes the preserved lemons, and this jar lives in our refrigerator for a year. Often we gift some, but I guess this year he just made, you know, this is called pandemic preserved lemons, right? It's like even more. We also have in New Orleans, we have lots of citrus trees, and we have people who neglect their citrus trees. And my husband is like a citrus vigilante, and he loves to pick citrus off of people's trees that he is confident they are not appreciating their fruit as much as they should. And so these were made with local Meyer lemons, you know, grown in Uptown. And I don't know if you can tell, but his are actually just like cut in half and quarters. I'm going to show you guys a prettier way to do them. And then we'll save it for the very end of of how to actually like work with that preserved lemon. So although I'm not stirring my rice, I am keeping a good eye on it. And I do want to make sure, you know, that it's still swimming. Right? So right now I still have a few more minutes. Okay, I definitely washed all of these lemons. These are just regular grocery store lemons. And then I'm going to show you. So I believe my recipe just called for 2. And then you have 2 extra because you're going to want the juice. All right, so I cut just the top off. That's going to go in my compost. And then what I'm going to do, I loved how Amber actually described this, is that I'm going to cut at 9 and 3, and then 6 and 12. And I'm not going all the way.
Come down a little. Yeah, there you go.
See? All right, so I've got it like that. I wish I had a jelly jar, but I don't. And so I'm just going to use this jar. But I highly recommend if you're making this at home, you really need to have a jelly jar that has like a lid. I'm just doing this for demoing purposes. All right, so here's my rice. I'm gonna add 2 more ladles because it's not swimming anymore. All right. And let's see. Okay, so I've got my lemons like this, right? And I'm just gonna kind of press them into my bowl. And you can, you know, push them hard enough to get some of those juices out. I was supposed to put salt at the bottom. Let me look at my recipe so I can actually follow, because guys, you know that we definitely don't follow a recipe for this one. I wrote it just for you guys. Okay, so I'm gonna
tablespoon salt.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I was just gonna say, I have it pulled up. You do a tablespoon of salt, then you put your lemons in.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make that happen by just pouring it here on the side. And then there we go, ta-da, lemon on, or salt on the bottom. Okay, I've got my lemons in there, and now it's time for my aromatics. So I've got my bay leaf. I have a cinnamon stick. Star anise, which I'm sure a lot of people don't have at home. So you would need to just go buy this. They probably only sell packs with like 4 or 5 in them. Like World Market sells ones with 4 or 5. So I don't think you'll have I have to buy a huge amount. So there, that one goes in. These are those green cardamom pods. And then black peppercorns and whole cloves. Okay, so I'm gonna sprinkle that in there. I'm gonna stir my rice.
Now, Katie, I did see some recipes online when I was looking for pictures of the lemons that I could like use as an example on our recipe that didn't have all those aromatics. So you could probably do it without, you just will get a different flavor profile, right?
Yeah, so I mean, was it just salt and
Yeah, I mean,
lemons?
it's basically just salt and lemons,
Yeah.
which, you know, it'll be more straight flavor.
Yeah. Boring is what I call that. I'm like, yeah, I if I was gonna wait a month for something, I would not just add salt. That's gonna be my argument, is like, if you're investing this much time to have this thing, I gotta go grab my plug real quick for the computer.
I knew she was gonna say that, y'all. I knew she was gonna say you have to have the spices, which I get it. It makes sense. But I know sometimes having all these whole spices on hand can be a lot. But I did like how she pointed. I don't know if anybody ever goes to World Market. We have it here in New Orleans, and that store, surprisingly, you can get a lot of decent food stuff that you wouldn't maybe necessarily think. And they have very reasonable prices. I know I saw, you know, sometimes I happen to find myself in there and I'm like, oh yeah, I need some sesame oil, or I need some rice paper today. Like they have all kinds of really cool stuff that maybe you can't always find at the regular grocery store. Although I would say a lot of the grocery stores nowadays have
Yes.
gotten better at carrying more types of spices and, you know, more ethnic, you know, cuisine products, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, and you know, in our household, that combo, we call that pho spices.
Yeah.
So it's very similar aromatics that would go into that delicious brothy soup that the Vietnamese are so well known for. And then I feel like once you own those things, you're like, okay, well, let me find something else that calls for star anise or a cinnamon stick. And honestly, my other favorite thing to do with those aromatics is just pour water over them and let it boil and make this beautiful smell. Williams Sonoma sells mulling spices, which is almost exactly the same thing for like $12 a can. And you can just make your own. I always do that, like starting at Thanksgiving. I really am like making my house smell like that. It means the holidays to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got my lemons and my aromatics in my glass bowl here. Let's just pretend that it's a mason jar. And now I'm gonna sprinkle my other tablespoon of salt on top. And then the other 2 lemons are here because you want to have enough liquid covering them of juice.
And so now, chef, if I was using, let me grab one of these jars I have. So I could use something like, you know, a jar.
Yes.
And then I would, if I was using a small one, I would just like squish it down in there, right? Like squish it, press it down.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would make a bigger batch if I was using this bigger jar, just so I could get it more full.
Yep. All right, I am gonna taste my rice. Oh no, I'm not ready.
Not ready.
No, but I will say it's like looking kind of ready. It's like, you know, the rice are starting to get much bigger.
We have a question for you too, Chef. Paulette is wondering if she skips the preserved lemons and
Yeah.
just does the lemon zest in the risotto recipe, how much are we talking about the flavor alteration? And maybe you can describe really like what is the deal with these preserved lemons? Why do we want to have these in our fridge?
Yeah. Okay. So I love this question. So if you just did the zest, what you would have would just be a lemon flavor, which is really delicious in this recipe. I mean, like I love lemon in general, so I'm always happy to add lemon, a zest of lemon to things. The preserved lemons adds a much more complex flavor, right? Because it's not only lemons that we're adding, but we're adding, they definitely have this almost like pickled effect to them. So they're kind of salty. They have this like, a bitter, soury kind of taste to them. And then obviously the aromatics are just it just is complex, right? It gives you this complexity. And the great thing is that like a very little bit goes a long way. So, I feel like to commit to this is not would hopefully not stress you out, right? You could find enough ways to utilize that preserved lemon, and you can add it to soups. I mean, I mentioned pho, so you could totally add it to your like a broth to make a soup. You could add it to like a chicken noodle soup, or trying to think of some of the other things that
I feel like even
we,
in like if you just made some plain cooked rice,
yes,
you were serving as a side dish with something, it could
yeah,
add, you can chop it up fine
yeah,
and stir it in with that, and it would add a nice little flavor. So
absolutely.
she's saying she does, oh, she says, do you also use preserved limes? And yeah, she's bringing up about like, I know it's very common. The preserved lemons come from Moroccan cuisine, and I know a lot of times they're added to those like chicken tagines, these like stewy kind of dishes
Yeah.
that
Oh
have a
yeah,
lot
you can
of
add it to
spice,
yogurt.
and then it kind of like another little flavor there to something kind of rich and heavy. Have you ever done it with limes, or have you ever had limes?
I haven't. I've never done it with limes. I would guess my only concern with limes is that their like skin and pith is a little bit thinner
Mm,
than lemons, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. It sounds delicious.
yeah.
We use all the limes that we pick from people's trees to make cocktails with, and so we've never had extra limes to do that. I do have a lime tree growing in my yard that we planted when Clive was born, but it has yet to bear fruit. So maybe one day we'll make preserved limes out of his tree. But lemon, I think the lemon is pretty common
Yeah.
to a certain extent. Okay, I just remembered that we still have scallops to cook. But before we do that, I'm sorry, I'm gonna pull out a lemon so that you guys can see how to cook with the preserved ones. Because as the recipe states, you are now going to put what I just made is going to want to sit in the refrigerator for a month. Otherwise, they are not going to be what you want them to be.
And so, yeah, but I think it's cool that home you can do this like home preserving where you'll have that, like you said, for a year.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, I also think like it's a pretty cool gift to give people. So, if you start this around Halloween, like this could be a Christmas gift, and maybe you just give somebody the equivalent of one lemon in a small jar or something, so that your friends get an opportunity to try something new as well. All right, so here is my preserved lemon, and you guys will be able to see that the
Very
inside is just going to slide right off, right? So now all I'm left with is the rind of it. The pith inside is like, you can see it's like no longer white. It's really soaked in. It smells delicious, that's for sure. This is trash. You do
Really?
not, yes, you do not want to eat the actual inside. The only thing we are going to be working with is this peel.
Cool.
Yeah. Now also note that I use my tongs to get my lemon out. It's something you don't want to cross contaminate. You don't want to stick your hands or a dirty spoon into that jar that is, going to continue living in your refrigerator for the next year. So always use something clean to pull it out. Now on the risotto side, real quick, I just want you guys to see that now I'm putting in my broth, and because a few dried mushrooms are, just in the way, I'm just letting them now live in my risotto. Ultimately, I'll pick those out towards the end. You can dice them up and add them back in. I tend to just discard them. The kids kind of push back too much about the rehydrated mushroom, so I just leave it out. I am just going to show you guys real quick here with the lemon. I bet it's kind of like blends into my cutting board, but I'm just going to cut some small strips. So again, like a julienne. And then a dice. And then I will say, I may not use all of this, but I'm just going to go ahead and cut it up. And then, because it's, again, one of those things where, you can always add more. You cannot take any out.
Chef, we have a quick question from Latasha. She's wondering, why is it that you don't use the inside? Is it because it's too bitter?
Yeah, I think it's bitter. It's salty. Texturally, it's not as nice either. This rind still has a bit of, a little tooth to it, for lack of a better word. So you just use the rind.
Just the rind. All right. Sounds good.
Okay. So now I'm going to pull out my scallops. Okay. So these are my scallops. They are on ice because you always want to keep seafood extra cold. Anytime I purchase any seafood, it goes on ice in my refrigerator, unless I am literally cooking it within 20 minutes of purchasing it, or an hour. I don't know. But for the most part, you just really want to keep it on ice, because there's nothing sadder than, bad seafood. Scallops ain't cheap. They're $25 a pound at Whole Foods these days.
Yeah.
But I did just ask the guy, I said, I just want 10 scallops. And actually, you know what? I think I'm just going to demo 4 for you guys, to be honest here. I think it'll be better for everyone involved. So let's see.
Now, do you have any thoughts? Because I happened to be in Whole Foods the other day when I was doing something. And I went by the frozen seafood case, or, the frozen seafood thing they have in the back of the store over by the one next to Gold Ring on Broad. And I didn't even know that they sold this, but they have these frozen scallops.
Oh.
Like they sell them in a bag. And I was wondering, I didn't even know that existed. I guess you didn't either.
I guess I will say I shouldn't be so surprised. I mean, honestly, a lot of food that we get, or that Whole Foods even sells in their case,
right,
in frozen.
Right.
If you get to Whole Foods right when they open, you'll see the lobster tails and some of the shrimp, it's still frozen. So, we shouldn't be so offended. It's how it can safely travel. Seafood companies do this thing that is in the biz referred to as IQF, instant quick freeze, which is something we can't do at home, right? So they're able to take these shrimps that have been caught right off the boat, and they put them in this just insanely cold freezer so that they freeze so fast. that they do actually maintain some freshness. For what we're doing, which is the seared scallops, I would be a little concerned that you would not get the brown that you're looking for in the seared scallops.
Well, that's my thing with, I know oftentimes with frozen shrimp, you have to be careful. You have to check the package, because I've made this mistake where I'm in a rush. I don't pay attention. I buy the bag of frozen shrimp. Then I realized when I was cooking it, I'm like, why is this not browning? Then I tasted it and I said, oh my gosh, this is really salty. And I realized I checked the bag in the trash and it had, I think it's called disodium phosphate. There are a couple different names for it, but it's a sodium based preservative basically, but it also pumps the seafood up with a little extra moisture content.
Yeah.
That sort of backfires when you're trying to get some browning and searing, and it can also add actual sodium to the dish, which you may not be looking for. So yeah, I agree, Katie. I think if you can get fresh scallops for seared, you know, by all, I would say like that's the way to go too. I was just wondering if you had any experience with these frozen ones. Can you, as you're going into the scallop demo, will you also just make sure you touch on the size? We have a question kind of about the size. So
I did, and I purposely picked one out that still has the foot.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to show you guys what I'm going to do, because I'm going to only save like a serving or two in here for me to eat as my lunch, basically. And I don't want the rest of my risotto to just like keep cooking. So I'm going to put the lid on what's here and set my like 2-minute timer, like I said. And then here, let's see. Be careful, these pans get hot, as I'm learning, as I'm holding it. Okay, so now I'm just spreading it out onto my tray. All right, and then I do this kind of neurotic thing where I make these like lines just to, again, help get some air circulating in there. And I'm gonna put this in my refrigerator. All right, so I now have risotto that I can eat tomorrow, the next day, ready to go. I've got extra chicken stock here because in my paranoia, I added that extra cup. I think I probably have a cup and a half, maybe 2 cups left in my pot. So I'm happy with that. So I do think, you know, certainly depending on how many people you are feeding, I would never bother cooking less than 2 cups of risotto, because for the amount of time it takes, why would you ever want to cook less? So if you are a single person or a family of 2 and 4 cups of rice seems like a lot, this is a great method to take half of it out of the pot immediately and cool in your refrigerator so that you can have some really delicious leftovers from it. I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've ever frozen risotto, but I would. I just don't think we've ever had so much left over that we've needed to freeze it. But I do think it's totally doable. It's not going to be the best risotto you've ever had in your life, but it definitely will be satisfying, right? Because all you're going to do is defrost and add a little bit of chicken stock, and now you have this, you know, delicious meal that didn't come from a grocery store and whatever. So yes, there's my thing. And also keep in mind the risotto I put in there doesn't have my mushrooms in it. It doesn't have the preserved lemon. So now I actually have the option that I could make it into something different if I wanted to. Okay, let's talk scallops. So here is the foot. Can you see that? Let me see if
Oh yeah, that's a good view.
that one. So this is the foot right here, and you'll see it just peels right off. No problem. Okay. So that definitely is just going to go in trash. You cannot compost that. This one does not have a foot. I think that was the only one.
Latosh just said she never knew that about the foot, and she sent a little mind blown emoji.
Oh, yes. And honestly, I think, often they fall off. Like you're not going to get a foot on every single scallop when you get them. So that it's possible you just, never seen
Yeah,
it.
maybe you got lucky. You never had
Yeah.
scallops. And they definitely will have it taken off in restaurants. If you ever order scallops in a restaurant,
Yeah,
it's gonna come off.
Okay, so I had them in this little plastic container. I just filled it with water and dumped it off. And now I'm gonna put them onto my paper towel. So because of the way these scallops are gonna cook, you really want them to be dry. Because you don't want that little bit of liquid to be, I'm gonna have to use this back burner here. You don't want that little bit of liquid to be like popping in your face. And it's going to help make sure that you get that nice brown caramelization. I have cooked scallops for many, many years. I've worked in the fish station for a long time, but I'm gonna be really honest with you guys, I have not cooked scallops in a long time. So everybody keep your fingers crossed for me that I pull this off, which I think I will. I do have enough confidence. Let's see. Okay, so again, I want to make sure I have everything. So I'm getting my butter, my oil.
Judy says that everyone has total confidence in you as well.
Oh, thanks.
Great.
Okay, so I gave you guys 3 teaspoons for a pound of scallops. So I'm only going to use about a teaspoon of oil to start to do. Let me find my. And then we do get like this little bit of butter at the end. I'm going to take that lid off of my pan there. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut myself a little nub of butter. And now I like measure a little bit of my salt. I'm going to sprinkle both sides. And again, black pepper. Okay, so I'm gonna get my burner going, and it's gonna be on pretty high heat. It's not the highest heat, but closer to high than medium in the medium high world, right? And we're just gonna make sure that our oil is good and hot. Now, you'll notice I'm not using my cast iron skillet, which I may have, but I wanted you guys to see it, oh, excuse me, in just like a silver skillet like this. I think it's going to, or I'm sorry, stainless steel. It's gonna let you guys see the coloring a little bit better and the cooking process versus the like dark black of the cast iron. But I do have this like little cast iron skillet that I would have been nice to cook like 2 or 3 in, because, or even up to 4, I guess, because it's that small surface area. It means that your oil isn't going to end up burning because almost all of the surface of your skillet is going to be covered. So I think this is a good size. This 8-inch skillet that I'm using here, I think will be just fine. And you want to heat it up until it's like almost smoking. So I mean like hot oil. And you can pay attention to your oil. It starts to do this kind of shimmery, wavy kind of thing. That's a good sign that your oil is hot enough. When you add the first scallop, if it doesn't do a really good like sizzle, start moving, then wait a minute before you add that second one. And then serve the first one to somebody else. Or save it for yourself, depending on what type of host you are. I can also like smell my oil, if that makes sense. You can start these are the things I try to cook the things I try to teach is how to cook with your senses. Cooking is way more than just following a recipe. I'm gonna have my handy fish spat ready. This is gonna make it a lot easier for me to flip the rice. And then I also have one of my favorites, cooking spoons, and this is what I'm going to use with that butter at the end to baste it. All right, so another thing you notice too is like your oil moves really easily in the pan. So that's a good sign. I've seen people do crazy stuff like drop a little bit of water in a pan to see if it's hot. Don't do that. Like, that's crazy. If you really wanted to do something, you could put like a piece of onion or a piece of mushroom or something, but I do not recommend adding any water to your oil. Okay, so I can actually see that it's like starting to smoke now. And notice, because of my kitchen's tilt, I'm gonna also place my scallops close to where I know my oil is kind of puddling up because my house tilts, and so does my oven. So I got that plate out of there. I'm gonna get a fresh plate. And I'm gonna rotate my pan, which we all know is my favorite thing to do. When you're cooking a protein, you don't wanna futz with it. Like, you have to have patience. Whether it's scallops or steak or chicken or pork or shrimp. And really, if you're trying to get a really good golden color on vegetables, you also don't want to futz with them. And so the key to doing that, I'm gonna turn my heat down just a little. I'm gonna rotate my pan again. I kind of, unfortunately, like, because of the back of my stove, I can never get the perfect like 12, 6, 3, and 9 that I would like. But in theory, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to like hit the opposite ends of the clock. I can see where it's like they're starting to get a little bit brown. Let me see can you see that on the edge there? But I'm really looking for it to brown like up the side of the scallop. Like, you should be able to not just see that it's getting brown on the bottom, but it actually should be going up a little bit there. My oil has also changed colors a little bit. It's a little bit browner now. I'm kind of swirling my oil, mainly because my pan's a little bit bigger. This is what I was saying about the cast iron thing again. Because of my tilt, I know that like the most oil is here and the hottest part of my pan. So now it is time to flip.
Beautiful.
Yeah, baby. Some things you just never unlearn, I guess. Okay, also notice, like, I didn't really have to do much work to flip those scallops. So if anytime you're browning proteins like this, if it starts to stick, stop and leave it be and rotate your pan. All right, and now I'm gonna add that little bit of butter. I'm holding my pan not just so you guys can see this, but because actually I want to pool this little bit of butter here. It's getting a little bit brown from the hot pan, and now I'm gonna do what we call basting. So I'm just scooping it here and pouring it right on top. And it smells amazing. I like purposely ate a very light breakfast so that I could enjoy these. And the great news is that the babysitter has my kids until 1, which means I might be able to just eat this in silence.
Couple questions for you, Katie, as you're getting basted. Paulette, would it be wise to use a power boost burner for the scallops? Wait,
I'm sorry. Say the question again.
Would it be wise to use a power boost burner for the scallops?
Yes. Okay, yes. Now, but you got to be careful with that. I'm going to show you why. So this one in the back here is called my power burner. That is the like medium. So I have one power burner that is this big. I did not use that one on purpose, but I did use my power burner that was that big. So I don't know if you have, do you have 2 power burners?
Yeah, I know all of
I
mine are
have one.
Just one?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So is it like power, no joke?
Sort of.
Okay. So then I would not use that one.
Just the regular.
Yep, just the regular. So I have a similar power burner, and let me tell you, most often, you're welcome, I burn stuff on that thing and I get so mad. So I do want you guys to see my pan, hopefully. Here, let me see actually. Okay, so I've got, you can, hopefully you can, all right, let me see where, can you see this, like, the oil kind of scorched a little bit on the side of it, and then I have this little bit of brown here, but I didn't have any scallops right here. Okay, hold on. This gets so tricky. There we go. Okay. I didn't have any scallops here. I noticed that it's not super burned, right? So like my oil did not scorch. And I think if you use that super power burner, that the part of your pan that does not have the scallops in it, it's gonna scorch. And then you're gonna have this like kind of scorched flavor in your on your scallops.
One last question for you about scallops. Can you talk a little bit about the size? And Judy was wondering, like, would you ever cut them in half?
Oh, okay. So you could cut them in half, but after you cook them. At Whole Foods, they were 10/20s, which means that there is about 10 to 20, which is a pretty big gap, right? I was like, what are you doing, Whole Foods? 10 to 20 in a pound, right? So these are nice sized scallops.
Yeah.
Like I'm happy with them.
I would say that 4 of those is a nice serving.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I would almost still just probably do 2. Scallops are very rich, right? And they could really take over this risotto that we just spent a lot of time trying to put together. So even at this size, I would do 2 scallops. I prefer U10s. That means that there's about 10 in a pound, and they're big and beautiful. And that way, you can get a really nice medium rare, because these aren't cooked like well done, right? You're really looking for like a medium rare. Okay, so I'm gonna pick out the mushrooms. And now I'm gonna add my cheese and some mushrooms. I'm just eyeballing this since I was, I chilled half of the rice, even a little bit more. So, and a little bit of that lemon.
And that was just some Parmesan cheese, right?
Yes, that was just plain old Parmesan cheese. I did grate it, myself. So this is the type of parm I prefer. I don't really get into the pre-shredded, or God forbid, the like Kraft frozen sawdust cheese.
The kind I grew up eating, you mean?
Yes, exactly. The stuff, my mom always kept it in the freezer.
Oh.
I don't know why, but that's where Fancy always kept it.
Maybe she wasn't going to go through it fast enough, figured it would keep.
Yeah. All right. So I just added another ladle of the broth just for my like reheating, because you want it to, be kind of moving like this. I just wanted to get it a little bit warm, because I am, no joke, gonna actually like eat lunch and enjoy it. I'm gonna give it one taste and make sure and see if it needs like either some pepper. Mm-hmm. I am gonna give it a little bit of pepper. Now I've got my very nice little soup bowl here. I'm gonna give myself about a half of a cup for a serving. Did we put a serving size on there?
I don't know that we did.
Okay.
Let me check. I mean, I know typically any grain dish, the recommended serving size is about a half a cup.
Yeah.
But we just said that it makes 8 servings on this.
Okay. All right. And I went and got my CSA this morning. It was part of my frantic to set up. And so I got these really beautiful, it's sunflower shoots and pea sprouts, or I'm sorry, pea shoots, sunflower sprouts. Look at that. That's fancy.
I mean, that looks like a restaurant dish.
Right?
It's beautiful.
Get in some good light here. Ta-da!
Yum.
We did it.
Yay.
Okay, great. I definitely thought we were going to be hitting the 1 o'clock mark. So I have to say, I'm really impressed that we pulled this off in the amount of time that we did.
Me too. Very good work. I think this was a fun class. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. I'm gonna go back to our view where we can see everybody as we wrap things up here. I know Aaron had mentioned that he was cooking along today, so hopefully that's been going well. I'm going to switch back over here to gallery view so I can see everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this class. We really appreciate your support of these. Just a little heads up, we are taking a little bit of a hiatus with these particular classes for the next couple of months, which is sad, but that is because we are going to be hosting our regular community class series that we normally host in person, which is a 6-week series of classes. Each week focuses on a different nutrition topic and we do different recipes and they kind of build on one another. We'll be doing those virtually. I know that the world is really starting to open back up again, but we already had these planned for virtual classes. So we're going to stick with them being virtual classes. But the good news is that means that maybe if it's something you think you'd like to join us for, and you don't live here in New Orleans and wouldn't necessarily be able to join us in person, you could take part in these. So we will be sending out information on that shortly. And we'll bring these classes back, these one-time fun classes, as soon as we get done with the 6 weeks of those. So don't fear, we're not getting rid of these quite yet. I think as long as people are signing up and interested, we'll keep doing them. So thank you again. We'll send out this video recording after class. I'll probably get it out on Monday. And if anybody needs anything or has any questions, you know how to reach us. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope that if you didn't make this dish today, hopefully you'll make it soon. Oh, how'd it come out? Looks good.
Yay.
Yum,
That's
yum,
great.
yum. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Happy Saturday.
Yeah, bye.
Beautiful weather.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully it's beautiful wherever you are.